And joining me now is the man of the hour at the convention, Mr. Wonderful Kevin OLeary.
Great to be here.
Good to have you here. Listen, before we go anywhere with this discussion, I want to ask you one thing. Are you a conservative?
Yes, I just joined the party. Now, it's very lucky because, as you know, I'm a taxpayer in Ontario, and Kathleen Wynne takes all my money. So I had a few dollars left over. I was scraped enough together to buy a membership to the Conservative Party because I felt to come to this platform without membership disingenuous, really, because I want to be a shareholder. I want to address this audience as a shareholder.
Fair enough, but how genuine was that? Because you've said in the past, look, I could be a liberal, I could be a conservative. It's about the policy, it's not about the party. Have you abandoned that now?
No, you know, at heart, I'm about lower taxation in support of small business, and that has always been the cornerstone and the soul of the Conservative Party. So, you know, when I was enjoying the platform of debating and watching the landslide that Trudeau brought into the Canadian political landscape, and I was quite impressed with it, actually. I toyed with the idea because, unfortunately for him, his policies are going to fail miserably in very easy, measurable ways. His economic policy is going to be a disaster for this country, and there's going to be an equivalent landslide the other direction. That's why I've decided to join this party, because they're going to be in power in 2019.
Okay, but to get to power in 2019, you've got to become competitive again.
Yeah.
Give me that one single thing that this party, now your party, has to do to become competitive again.
I'll be talking about this later to the entire constituency. What is occurring is off a keynote that Harper said last night, which is really interesting. I felt that speech was written from him personally. It was very soulful, but he said something that I think is very important for everybody here to listen to. He said, we can't define the future from the past. You have to forget about the past. And so this party is going through, in the halls, in the bars in this town tonight and last night, a soul searching to redefine itself, because it can never be a majority again in its current configuration.
In other words, you can get all the Conservative votes, 30%.
And you'll still be a loser.
But you'll always be second place.
So the plan here is to redefine the brand of what conservative means. A far broader audience, a larger constituency, a much more open mandate. And so, for example, small things, but important to Canadians, assisted suicide, yes. Legalizing marijuana, yes. Gay rights, yes. All of these are going to be identical to the Liberal parties. But the big difference and how you differentiate this party is you put it on the side of the taxpayer. More transparency in how taxpayers' money is spent, more metrics on productivity, more discipline in spending, more adult supervision in how money is actually deployed in measurable ways. And I'll give you an example. What I'm going to be using my platform for, and I'm being transparent with you about this, my interests are primarily economic and fiscal policy in Canada, because it's uncompetitive. Trudeau's mandate, now that I've actually seen his budget, is going to fail in three ways. Number one, there'll be no wage inflation, so Canadians in 36 months will have not made a dime more. Number two, your home, the largest Canadian asset, will probably either be stagnant or down materially because of the fact that it's just the end of the cycle. It's not all his fault, but that's going to happen anyways. But here's why he's going to lose the next election. He swept in with a populist mandate, much of it driven by a broad base of millennials, people in their 20s and early 30s, in offering them jobs. He basically said, look, come with me and I'll redefine your role in our society. Those poor people aren't going to get any work. There is no economic growth in this country. I've looked at his spending plans. It is going to be a disaster.
Let me ask you one question, though, because this is the intersection of social policy and economic policy. And that if you want to have a bigger role in this party, you're going to have to address, and that's environment and climate change.
Yes.
Because you're talking about millennials. That's a key issue for them.
You're absolutely right.
This party has basically abandoned any notion of policy on that front for the past 10 years. So let me ask you fundamentally, first of all, do you believe that climate change is man-made?
You know, you're asking the right guy, because I think I'm the only constituent in this room that is the original graduating cohort at the University of Waterloo, the very first graduate in environmental studies back in 1977. Michael Michalachki led that first cohort. That's what he asked us as graduate students back in '97. He was so far ahead of his time. There is no question that man has an impact on climate, and you can see it occurring, but it's how you react to it that matters. And so what we've done wrong in this country and this is something very close to what I think is right, is when you talk about carbon taxation or emissions or standards you wish to make commitments to globally, and you make that seriously. You go to the globe, you say, I'm going to lower our carbon emissions to X. You don't make that a mandate of the government other than to put the regulatory environment in place. You let the private sector create the technology to get to that answer. And so look at what Ontario is doing, and I'll just use that.
Well, what's the incentive theory there?
Because what you do is you make it law. You basically say, look, we're going to reduce our emissions to this standard. And every Canadian agrees, okay? The Canadian population agrees. They agree. They vote in a constituency that is going to deliver that mandate.
With big consequences.
Well, here's what you do. When you create that debate to set the standards, you go to the population, explain the challenge. How they do it in Switzerland, how they do it in Sweden, how they do it in many other countries that are as concerned as we are. They create a referendum around this issue and they say, how important is it to you as a Swiss citizen? And what would you like our standard to be? Here are the competitive standards around us. Here's what the Chinese are doing, the Indians are doing. What do you want ours to be? And they do a referendum. Every citizen votes. And they set that standard. But here's the difference, and this is what we should adopt. And I use Ontario as the example. Once you set the standard and all the constituents agree, business, individuals alike, you let the private sector reach those goals using their own dollars to do it. You don't extract it in the form of a tax, as Kathleen or Rachel Notley has, because she's now going to piss all that money away. She has no idea on how to spend it or pick green winners or losers. She has no experience doing that, and she's already lost $308 billion. We're in deficit. She's incompetent at running a hedge fund or a slush fund for that matter, which is what this is. It has no transparency. So I'm taking a shot at her as the wrong way to do it. But this constituency, the Conservative Party, is not against climate change or controls thereof. I mean, they want Canada to be the #1 country in a place to live and breathe air in, but it's how we get there. There's a different way to get there. I'm very much in providing that incentive to industry and letting them solve it themselves.
Okay, I have to obviously ask you the obvious question. How close are you to deciding whether you're going to run for the leadership or not?
Well, it's a great question, and I have a standard answer now, as probably all the other members that are considering running. This whole thing's running a year early, frankly. The fact that you and I are talking about this, we're having this convention, this is so early in the cycle, it's crazy. This decision will probably be made sometime in January. Anywhere between October and January, you'll start to see who's going to come out of the weeds and who's going to play. My strategy, just again to be totally transparent, is to use this platform and the dialogue I'm having with the media, with the constituency, that I reach 10.2 million people a week now in North America. It's a huge amount of people. And my fastest growing constituency is 9 to 18-year-old millennials. So I'm reaching the core of our next generation. They enjoy watching me on Shark Tank, on Dragon's Den, and Beyond the Den, and whatever, all of that stuff. My message to them is, look, let's, during this next year and then the 2 years after that, I'm going to help you shine the light of transparency on all the economic decisions our governments make. So when Kathleen Wynne puts a slush fund in place for $1.9 billion, I'm going to ask her every quarter to report on what she invested it in. And as she promised me as a taxpayer, she promised me that every quarter carbon emissions would be reduced. Then of course she'll tell us how that's going. Either she'll be successful or she'll fail. I think she's going to fail miserably. That'll cost her a lot politically. We'll get rid of her that way. And I'm going to tell my constituency, let's do that together. Let's force that transparency. She is in fact our employee. We pay her. I'm a taxpayer, she works for me. I need to have that information. I'm asking her as her boss. I'm willing to help her actually formulate it, which is what I do in the private sector for a lot of money every day, and I'm not going to charge her anything. I'm going to do it for free. That's why they call me Mr. Wonderful, by the way.
Okay, well, Mr. Wonderful, the question I'm left with is this. You're an outsider, although you just bought the party membership. But
very expensive.
You're an outsider. You talk about your business experience. You talk about your TV shows, how big your audience is, what your demo is. Yeah. I mean, you're talking the lingo of show business here.
What is politics, by the way?
Well, okay, it's show business for ugly people, right? I mean,
well, it's show business. I think it's show business on steroids with big outcomes.
Well, fair enough, but explain to me then, as a disruptor from the outside, with that type of background you've got, why are you not Canada's answer to Donald Trump?
It's a great question, and obviously I've been asked it multiple times in the last 48 hours. And there are some similarities, and let's be honest about it. We both work for Mark Burnett, the #1 producer of reality television on earth. We both got our platforms from Mark. We both know Mark, we know each other, I know his family, etc. That's where the similarities end. The truth is, Trump is dealing with a different set of pressures in his constituency than we have in Canada. There is no wall, or ever will be in Canada. I'm half Lebanese, half Irish. I wouldn't be here if there was a wall. The point is, other than, I wish I had the similarity that his hair, I wouldn't mind having some hair, but I don't. I'm not Donald Trump, everybody knows that, but I do tell the truth. I have a very interesting set of followers that in many cases may not even like me, but trust me, which is an interesting place. And I have just one goal. I really am interested in making this country more competitively, globally in business.
You want to make Canada great again?
No, it's not. It's already great. We don't need to be great again. We need to be competitive financially. The whole journey for me and why I'm on this riser with you now happened like a bolt of lightning just a few months ago. I teach graduating cohorts in engineering. I teach Notre Dame, I teach MIT, Waterloo, McGill. At an evening class recently here in Canada, it goes from 6 to 9. Maybe the cohort's 600 people, right? About a third of the class are entrepreneurs. They come down after. We talk. Sometimes we go out for a drink. Every time I teach in Canada, they say to me, listen, Kevin, I'm graduating. I'm an engineer, mechanical, robotic, whatever. I know you know everybody in the US. Can you give me a contact at Google, at Microsoft, at Yahoo, at Uber? And I say to them, why do you want to leave here and go work there? Why, after getting an amazing education with an incredible brand like Waterloo or McGill, aren't you setting up a company here? In fact, I'll fund it. Like, I'm looking for new deals, and that's why I'm teaching you guys to get a competitive advantage on new startups. They say to me, why would I want to be paid in dollarettes and be taxed at 54.3%? And I can't attract anybody here because the tax rates are so crazy. Why don't I just go do it in the US where they want people like me? And I'm thinking to myself, how screwed up is that? You know who I blame for that? I blame our politicians for creating an environment where we can't even keep our best and brightest, for making it so uncompetitive, so highly taxed, so overregulated with such stupid policy, incompetence, stupidity. I just want to call them out on it. I've had enough. I really have had enough. I'm a proud Canadian. I've been very lucky in my business career, and now I'm just pissed off. I'm going to do something about it. If I can shine the light of transparency and make the life of an incompetent politician miserable so they go pursue another opportunity, I've done a great thing for Canada.
I can't help but think, though, of the stories I'm listening to you about the guy who cleans up after the elephants in the parade, and somebody says, you don't have to do that job anymore. And he says, what, give up show business? But you're prepared to give up show business for this.
I think life is a journey, and the doors that open to you, you never know what they're going to be. My life has been serendipitous. I wouldn't have changed anything. That evening class really made me think, why can't we get competent people running our economic and fiscal policy? Why is there nobody doing that? Why do we have to be so second tier? Where is it written we have to be so moronic in our policies? I'll give you another one that is so close to what you do, and you'll understand this. This is a stunning story of incompetence. I'm in San Francisco. A major American network calls me. They call Nancy, who coordinates my time, says, can we get Kevin in front of our camera in our studio in the next 15 minutes? We understand that you have an agency called the CRTC in Canada that just ruled that you're going to allow our American ads to remain on the game on a Canadian network. We need a Canadian to answer that. First of all, when they asked me that, because I said, Nancy, you got that wrong. That can't be true. That's not going to happen. The network that bought the Super Bowl paid millions for it, and the only way they can get paid back is to sell advertising. She said, no, Kevin, they want you to answer that question. So I quickly called some contacts I had, and lo and behold, it's true. You would have to be an idiot, a moron, to put that policy in place. And yet there is such a moron inside the CRTC. That is such a disadvantage to Canadian taxpayers and businesses and consumers. You can watch any Super Bowl ad you want on the internet long before it airs on the day of the Super Bowl, so they have access to it. But you have personally, whoever made that decision at the CRTC, crippled a Canadian business's ability to reach the largest sporting audience of the year. That is criminal. That is un-Canadian, That's stupid. It's just plain stupid. And when I see that, it just pisses me off. I want to change that kind of stupidity. It's that simple, my friend.
It pisses me off. Sounds like a campaign slogan to me.
It should be. And when I see that kind of incompetence, it frustrates me that I'm a taxpayer that supports that mediocrity and stupidity. It makes my Lebanese Irish blood boil. I'm pissed, and I want to fix it.
Kevin OLeary, always an experience talking to you.
Thank you very much.